All right, so Acts 24 is where we are picking up. Just brief reminder, Paul has made his way back to Jerusalem. He had been warned by the leaders of the church that folks were saying all manner of evil things about what he was purportedly doing or not doing, and in an effort to appease those rumors about saying that he was teaching Jews to just abandon keeping the practices of the law. He went through the process of going through the completion of a vow ceremony, that of a Nazarene, Nazarite, one of those, where you, at the end of it, you shaved your head and you offer a certain number of sacrifices. Anyway, he was in the temple and going through the process of that. And when some folks who knew him from Asia, where Ephesus was at, raised the alarm and said, that guy who's been speaking evil against the law and the customs and our people, and oh yeah, he's even brought a Gentile into the temple, which wasn't one with him. They're just making stuff up. They'd seen him around Jerusalem with one of his Gentile buddies, and so things just go powder keg. People drag him out of the temple. The temple doors are slammed shut, thinking, there's been this massive breach of protocol. And they commence to go ahead and beat the crap out of him until they're ready to kill him, trying to kill him. And the Roman captain who's stationed there with the guard right near the temple rushes outside of the big band of soldiers and snatches him up and arrests him, thinking he's the source of all this trouble, tries to figure out what's going on, doesn't get a straight answer, takes him through the throngs of people to the steps of the castle, and Paul asks for permission to speak to them. He gives his testimony to them about being born and raised a Jew, strict Pharisee, really antagonistic against followers of Christ, right up until the time when Christ appeared to him. And then he began to teach that Jesus was the Christ very publicly, and that Jesus was actually sending him unto the Gentiles. And that was about the end of his message, because when he said Gentiles, they went berserk. And then he was pulled into the castle and was going to be whipped to interrogate him. And he informed them politely, is it lawful to do that to a Roman citizen? And they realized, no, he's a Roman citizen. And they verified that. And so they had to go about a different tactic. And so they invited him down to the council, the Jewish leaders, to have a discussion of what's he being charged with, because that's what the captain wants to know. What was the source of all this trouble? Well, he doesn't get a real good answer, because at the meeting the next day, Paul sees that part of the council is Pharisees who believe in a resurrection, and parts are Sadducees who don't at all. And so he lays it out that, I'm a Pharisee, son of a Pharisee. I'm here because I believe in the hope that we have of a resurrection. And so that pitted those two groups against each other, and they commenced arguing. And again, the captain is fearful that they're going to just pull him apart. So this isn't the big mob outside. This is in more like, the conference room setting, and people are just going crazy over it. And so he takes them again out, and while they're trying to figure out what to do next, 40 men conspire together that they are so vehemently opposed to Paul's existence and teaching that they are going to kill him. And they're so serious about it, they swear they're not going to eat or drink until he's dead. And so they go to the council and say, hey, we want you to help us in this. You ask the captain there to send him down to you tomorrow to ask some additional questions. And while he's on the way out of the castle, but before he gets to you, we'll kill him. And so the Lord had arranged it so Paul's nephew happened to overhear the plot, tells it to the Romans. The Romans, not wanting somebody to kill their prisoner, get him out of town that night. They send him with an escort of about 500 men, I think 470. And they leave. So here on your map, you've got Jerusalem. They leave Jerusalem and they travel down here to Antipatris. And that's as far as the foot soldiers go. And then they go back to the Jerusalem in the next morning. And then the soldiers on horse with Paul will take him the rest of the way to the port city of Caesarea. And that's where he is delivered to the Roman governor, whose name is Felix. So Felix read the letter that was sent with Paul by the captain Claudius, and Claudius tried to make himself look as best as possible, saying there was a riot going on, and these Jews were about to kill this Roman citizen, and so we came and rescued him. And when I tried to figure out what their problem was, I couldn't understand anything other than the questions of their laws or customs. But then I found out they were conspiring to kill him, and so I sent him to you so he'd be safe. Farewell. Good luck. And so after reading that letter, Festus says, all right, I'm not going to do anything. I will hear this matter. It's in my jurisdiction, because Paul was within his jurisdiction somehow. But he's going to wait until the Jewish leaders come down from Jerusalem, and so he can hear them all at the same time. So we got the accusers and the accused. And so that's where we're picking up in chapter 24. So this is 5 days after he's been delivered from Jerusalem and the imminent death from those conspirators. So now he's in Caesarea, and he's been held for another 5 days in jail. And so that's where we pick up. So after 5 days, Ananias, as the high priest, descended with the elders. We say descending because Jerusalem's up in the mountains, downhill to sea level, to Caesarea, with the elders and with a certain orator named Tertullus, who informed the governor against Paul. An orator, this is a professional talker. This is a speaker. Like, you go to court, you don't want to represent yourself, you hire an attorney to speak for you. That's basically what this is. You've got the best and the brightest of the Jewish council, and they have brought their silver-tongued fellow to speak for them, and he is going to be the prosecutor, charging Paul. When he was called forth, Tertullus began to accuse him. Have his opening statement recorded here. Seeing that by thee, talking to Festus there, not Festus, we're still Felix. Sorry, there's two guys and they're very similar names, so I'll make sure to Felix. All right, so talking to Felix. Seeing that by thee, Felix, we enjoy great quietness, we being the Jews, nation of Israel, we enjoy great quietness, and that very worthy deeds are done unto this nation by thy providence. Right, so he is kissing up. He was buttering him up, we have great peace and harmony. Thank you so much for being our overlord military leader. You're awesome. We have quietness, we have peace, and you do a lot of good stuff for us. Right? We're very thankful for you. We accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. And he's just laying it on thick about how grateful they are that he is in charge. He's the Roman governor, and just what an awesome guy he is. And so, starts by kissing up to the judge. Notwithstanding that I be not further tedious with thee, which is exactly what he is being, I pray thee that thou wouldest hear of thy clemency a few words. Please listen to us for just a few words. He's having this just over the top oration, but framing it as if he's speaking simply. For we have found this man, just imagine him pointing at Paul, this man, a pestilent fellow, and a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. So pestilent, just troublesome, a plague, a pox. He is awful. And not only that, he is stirring up rebellion, not just among the Jews there in Israel, but among the Jews spread throughout all the Roman Empire, throughout all the world. And he is a ringleader. It's a very negative term for the head of a criminal gang. He is the ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. That's their term for Christians. Jesus being referred to as the Nazarene. These splinter group of Jews who believe that somehow the Christ has come. This guy is their ringleader. Who also, as if that's not bad enough, pestilent, mover of sedition, leading rebellions, a ringleader of this group, he hath also gone about to profane the temple. Again, he's repeating the charge that those Asian Jews had laid against him, that he had brought a Gentile into the temple, into a spot where they weren't allowed. There's a courtyard of the Gentiles where Gentiles were permitted, but beyond that, it was just Jews. And so he's saying, he's profaned our temple, whom we took and would have judged according to our law, saying that we were acting in a judicious manner. We had seen the issue, we'd handled it, we'd already judged it, and we were going to mete out, judgment, sentence, and would have judged according to our law. Again, this is a riot. This is a mob. This was just, unrestrained chaos that he's trying to frame as if this was a court proceeding that had been interrupted. But the chief captain Lysias, the Roman captain, came upon us and with great violence took him away out of our hands. This was a Jewish matter. We were handling it. And your officer way overstepped here, and he was harsh. He was not polite or kind or respecting our authority, which we have from you, autonomy. Took him away out of our hands, and commanding his accusers to come unto thee. Right? We've had a removal of venue. We were handling it there in Jerusalem, and he has forced us to come all the way down here to you, to trouble you with this matter. By examining of whom thyself mayest take knowledge of all these things whereof we accuse him. So he's putting it in your plate that you're going to have to, look into this so that you can then have an understanding of all these things. And the Jews also assented, saying these things were so. And so Tertullus kind of wraps up his little opening statement there, and all the elders behind him go, yep, that's so. That's how it happens. He's speaking true. And so Paul, after the governor had beckoned him to speak, right? So they've had their crack at accusing him. Paul, is pointed to by Felix, and all right, you get a chance to speak. So I was under the Roman law. The accuser and the accused both have an opportunity to speak. Paul says, "Forasmuch as I know that thou hast of many years been a judge unto this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself." So he says, I know that you understand. You've been here a long time. You know the culture. You know the background. Not only that, he has a Jewish wife. So he is happy to be judged by, if you have got to be judged before a Roman, let it be one who knows, background. So he's been there for many years. I'm happy to answer for you. Because that thou mayest understand that there are not yet but 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem for to worship. So that time period, how long has it been since he was arrested by the mob? It's been 12 days. I went up to Jerusalem for to worship, and they neither found me in the temple disputing with any man. He says, I wasn't causing trouble. I wasn't arguing with anybody about my beliefs and who the Christ is. Neither raising up the people. I was not actively engaging in any sedition or riot or trying to, cause turmoil. Neither in the synagogues nor in the cities. I wasn't doing in the temple. I wasn't doing in the local meeting houses, because there were a bunch of synagogues in Jerusalem, nor anywhere else in the city. Neither can they now prove the things where they now accuse me. He says, they're just making broad accusations. None of these guys have seen me doing any of these things, particularly down to defiling the temple. It's all just, accusations with no evidence, no support. But this I confess unto thee, that after the way which they call heresy, so worship I the God of my fathers. As far as that portion of being a sect of the Nazarene, they may call it heresy, but that I'll readily admit. That's how I worship the God of my fathers, the God of the Jews, Jehovah, believing all things which are written in the law and the prophets, and have hope towards God, which they themselves also allow, that there shall be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. So he says, I am just believing the fulfillment of what all the things that, at least the Pharisees amongst the elders believe, that there will be a resurrection of the dead, and that there's a hope of the Christ and the Messiah coming. And so herein do I exercise myself to have always a conscience void of offense towards God and towards man. He says, I am striving to operate with a clear conscience. I'm not doing anything untoward, either towards God or towards men, Romans or Jews. Whereupon, so verse 17, now after many years, I came to bring alms to my nations and offerings, right? He had been dispatched to go back to Jerusalem, and part of his reason for coming is that there had been funds gathered up to go and give to the poor there in Jerusalem, the poor persecuted Christians. And so he was bringing those. I was bringing alms, right? Those are small gifts or offerings. Whereupon, he's there in the temple. Whereupon certain Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple. He wasn't there uncleanly. He was calm and quiet and doing what he was supposed to. Neither with multitude nor with tumult. He wasn't causing a ruckus, wasn't causing a scene. He said, who ought to have been here before thee and object if they had aught else against me. He says, those Jews that started the riot back then, they should be here now, right? They made those accusations about what I'd done. These elders, they weren't even there. They have no idea. They certainly can't testify to it. Well, these others should be here if they were going to, and they wouldn't be able to either. Or else let these same here say, if they have found any evil doing in me while I stood before the council. He said, these guys could testify of when they did see me, and that was at their council. And if there's any evil I did, let them speak to that. And the only thing they could really said, except it be for this one thing, that I cried standing among them, touching the resurrection of the dead, I am called into question by you this day. So he's saying, this is what I said at the council, and that's what he did say right before the powder keg, kind of blew off between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He believes in the resurrection of the dead. Now, when Felix heard these things, having more perfect knowledge of that way, right? That way is referring to Christianity. It's referring to a belief in Christ, of knowledge of what had gone on 30 years ago with Jesus's death, burial, and resurrection, as far as the knowledge that was associated with that. Having more perfect knowledge of it, he deferred them and said, when Lysias, the chief captain, shall come down, I will know the uttermost of your matter. Right? So we've got a delayment of the case, right? So you had the elders come and present, but you didn't have the Roman representative, right? The one who was there to counteract this testimony about how he, with great violence, took them out of their hands. We need the Roman captain here. I want to hear from him. And so the whole thing, the trial's put on pause. But he commanded a centurion to keep Paul and to let him have liberty, and that he should forbid none of his acquaintance to minister or come unto him. So he was still under arrest, and he had at least a special guard responsible for him, but this was not caged up with no freedom of movement or liberty whatsoever. We don't know how broad that freedom was, but he at least had the ability to have friends come and see him. He wasn't in solitary confinement or really locked. He wasn't in hard lockdown, but he still had to stay there until the trial could continue. So we got some measure of freedom. So his friends could come and visit with him. And so after certain days, when Felix came with his wife, Drusilla, which was a Jewess, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. And so he specifically reached out to Paul. Right? We had kind of this introduction into it, and he wanted to hear straight from him. And so Paul, as he reasoned of righteousness and temperance, self-control, and judgment to come, right? You've got kind of this broad categories within the understanding of being a follower of Christ and what Christ has accomplished, and just kind of the gospel all together. Felix's response was to tremble. Right? He had some physical shaking amongst his body, and his answer is, all right, go away, go thy way for this time. When I have a convenient season, I will call for thee. So we'll talk again later. And they did. They talked many times. And what Luke tells us in 26 is what was his motivation for continuing to call him. He hoped that money should be given him by Paul. He hoped that money should be given him by Paul that he might loose him. Wherefore he sent for him the oftener and communed with him. Right? So he had frequent interactions with him, and the idea is that hopefully Paul would eventually get the idea that if you just pay me some money, you'll get out of jail, right? Get out of jail, not free card, but at a cost. And so he was looking at this situation as an opportunity to make some funds. Right? This was not a murderer that we're going to release with a bribe, but someone on laws and customs, give me some money. But Paul never did. And so he wound up staying in that situation with this, constrained liberty, but still under arrest for 2 whole years until Felix's term as governor ends and Rome replaces him with a new guy named Porcius Festus. And so this is one of the data points that we have that lets us know our passage of time. I don't have my chart handy, unfortunately, but I believe, well, I don't guess, but can look it up and tell you later, but there's a distinct year in Roman history of when these 2 guys had the changing of the guard, and so we can get pretty close to knowing at what time period this was. So overlaying Acts with secular history. So that's where Paul hangs out for 2 years, and that will tee up chapters 25 and 26, which we'll probably look at one time next week.